Okay, welcome everyone to this month's National Equine Conference call. Thanks for everyone joining us today. I will, as usual, post the recording of this call on the Equine Disease Communication Center within a week of this call. As always, I appreciate any suggestions of topics and speaker ideas. Just a note before we begin today, the April call has been canceled due to some scheduling conflicts. So we will not have a call next month, but we will return our calls in May. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Dr. Maggie Baldwin, State Veterinarian for Colorado, to give an EIA, equine pyroplasmosis update. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, Katie. And I just sent a request to share my screen if you can grant me permission. I've got a few slides that I can go through. See if it works. Okay. Can you see that okay, Katie? Can somebody confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, sorry. Sorry, Maggie, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. So this is actually a slide deck from some other presentations that we've given recently. So I have some background information that I will zoom over for this group. First, Katie, I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to go first. We are in legislative session, so I have to head down to the Capitol here shortly. But I wanted to give an update on our EAA EP cases. And of course, Dr. Angela Pelzel-McCluskey is on and will help answer any questions that I might need assistance in answering. So I'm not going to go through the background on EIA and EP. I think this group is very well aware. I did want to point out on this slide that this is actually a clinical case that we had here in Colorado. The pictures of this mare was a clinical case we had a number of years ago. And the premises that this mare was on years ago is one of the prems that is tied up in the current cluster of cases that we've had here in Colorado. So we have had some clinical disease associated with these cases, but just wanted to share these couple of pictures because I think they're pretty striking. And this is another one. I'll drop the link to this YouTube investigative report that Fox 31 did back in 2019 about match racing here in Colorado. The cases that we're going to talk about here shortly are all associated with match racing facilities, match racing in general. And Fox 31 did a very in-depth investigative report a number of years ago here in Colorado. And I think that for those that might be interested, I think it's about maybe a half hour long. There's a number of different segments that are part of this YouTube video, but I'll drop that link in the chat as well. So to get to what we're here to talk about, the cases that we've had over the last several months. So in December 2025, there was a Colorado mare that initially tested positive for EIA. This horse was tested as part of she had been sold to somebody down in Texas and was being moved interstate and was tested as part of that interstate requirement and initially tested positive for equine infectious anemia. Subsequent testing revealed she was co-infected with equine pyroplasmosis as well. Of course, this initiated an investigation. The index premises was a match racing facility where the primary trainer had been involved in a number of trainings with these horses. And of course, we believe all of this has been iatrogenic transmission. This, as part of our investigation tracing, we do have hold authority as well as quarantine authority here in Colorado. So for any of those trace premises where we have not yet detected disease, we put them under a hold order, no, nothing in, nothing out until we get testing done. Of course, we've been doing regulatory rebleeds of any of the initial positives, as well as 30 and 60-day retesting on these facilities. So again, this is more for other audiences, not necessarily this one, but normally our tracing activities are very complex. This one has proven to be even more complex because the human is the vector. And so trying to identify what other horses have been trained or exposed via the trainers has been a little bit challenging, but we've been able to build some trust within some of the members of this community. And I think that has helped us with our investigation overall. Of course, if we had CVIs or brand inspections, those types of things, we'd be looking at that, but not a lot of the horses and owners have been getting those for movements. So that has been a little bit challenging. A lot of these horses have come from sanctioned racing, and so a lot are tattooed, and we're able to find some information on Equibase for them as well. So this is an overview of the positive prems. Our index premises was in Adams County, so we had to come up with a naming convention, which has gotten a little bit more complicated recently, but our Adams 01 index premises had 14 horses total. 3 of them were positive for EIA. 2 of those horses were also co-infected with piroplasmosis. The index horse, I think, was somewhat clinical. She had declined in body condition. When we looked at the horse, it was not a well-to-do horse. So, the initial pictures kind of were flagged us a little bit. And that horse was euthanized, of course, first. The 2 other positive EIA horses have been euthanized. Then there was an additional 2 positive horses that were positive for piroplasmosis only. They have elected to enroll both of those horses in the treatment program. And so we anticipate once they clear their last 60-day EIA test that they'll be enrolled in that piroplasmosis treatment program. That owner did admit, or that trainer of the first index cases of horses, they did admit that they were reusing IV sets. So they didn't reuse needles, but they were reusing IV sets. And since this happened, he has implemented some new practices. One, not reusing IV sets or other sort of equipment, but also he has said that any new horses coming into his facility will be tested for piroplasmosis and EIA before coming, which was great to hear that he wanted to take that initiative and take that step. And that is actually why we found, you'll see in the top right-hand corner, Weld 04, that EP positive was because that horse was supposed to go to the Adams 01 training facility. And so he required them to be tested for EIA and piroplasmosis, and we found another piroplasmosis positive. So we're going to call Weld 04 a success story. We're happy that he implemented that test requirement. I hope he continues that test requirement. So Weld 04 was due to that. The trace facility Weld 01, that is a facility that the 3 positive EIA horses at Adams 01 had been at last year for training. So all 3 of those EIA positives were at Weld 01 for a period of time for training underneath another trainer who also admitted that he was reusing IV sets, and so likely another source of exposure. So we tested, when we went out to that facility at Weld 01, there were supposed to be 8 horses for us to test. As you can see, there ended up being 22 horses for us to test. Those initial 8 horses were tested because those had been under the same trainer as the 3 positive EIA horses. 3 of those 8 came back positive for EIA, but when we got to that facility, there was a whole lot of other horses there. So they had used that as sort of a boarding facility, and then the owner of the facility had a lot of just horses he had been collecting. They were not used for much of anything, but they were out in pastures and pens. So we ended up testing all of the horses at that facility, which was really good because we did find another EIA positive, and that was actually a roping horse that hadn't really been used in the last several years. And we don't really know where the source for that EIA had come from for that facility. Weld 03 had a horse that had been at Weld 01, and that horse, when we went out there, did test positive for EIA as well. The trace to Adams 02 was a little bit more complicated, but essentially they had a horse that had been at Weld 01 or Adams 01 at some point in time and had gone to this Adams 02 facility and ended up dying. But we ended up testing the rest of the horses. We tested 25 horses total at that facility, and 17 of them tested positive for equine piroplasmosis. We went out on Friday of last week to do regulatory rebleeds of all of them, and so we're waiting for confirmatory testing. But that's the most piroplasmosis positives we've found at one facility. There's a lot of different owners. The trainer is at this point in time not willing to share all of the information on the owners, and we're hoping that with some additional work, we'll get the contact information for all of the owners and then determine what they want to do with those 17 horses. We've had a number of additional traces, and this is still very early on, and we still have a lot more tracing to do. And there will be some out-of-state traces. Some of the out-of-state traces are older, so they're going to be several years old. We don't have a lot of recent movements of those horses, but also still checking Equibase, especially with the newer positive prem with so many. So the other 4 facilities we've tested so far have all been negative, which is great. Trace premises number 3 is one that they have the primary racetrack that most of these folks use is at the trace premises number 3. And that is where we've had EIA positives in the past too. So we are trying to use those folks to spread the word. And that causes some folks to go into hiding, but it also causes some folks to reach out to us directly and they are concerned about the health of their horses and they want to do the right thing in testing. So summary total, we've tested 9 prems so far in Colorado, 117 horses have been tested. 5 of those prems have been positive, and we've had a total of 28 positive horses, 6 EIA positive only. Those have all been euthanized, 2 that were co-infected with paraplasmosis, also euthanized, and then 20 additional EP only horses, and we're pending treatment enrollment for some of those. So wanted to just briefly mention some successes and some challenges with this one so far. One big success for us is we've had a very experienced interpreter that we've been actually working with for probably more than a decade in Colorado. She is former law enforcement, and she is able to help us build that trust with those individuals. And so it's been really, really successful having her. She does 3-way calls with us. So we can, make that initial call to set up the tracing and testing at those facilities. But she also comes out on site with us and is able to have those direct communications with the owners out on those facilities. One of the facilities, the owner, it was a large boarding facility. He actually asked if he could take a video of us doing the testing and ask us some questions about what we're doing and share it on his social media so all of his owners know what was going on. It was a little bit hesitant to do that, but we did do that. And hopefully that was able to help spread the word. He worked with our interpreter to get some handouts that were directly for those folks on that facility. And we were able to share and spread the word. And then again, as I already mentioned, one of the trainers implementing that new testing, hopefully we are able to set that as a standard, and that would be great. One thing that I didn't mention yet, but we are looking at standing up a state level working group to discuss mat tracing in the state of Colorado. It's not inherently illegal to do mat tracing, but of course there's a lot of challenges that we're encountering. And with the latest cases, I think this is really demonstrating that we need to do something different. So challenges for us over the last several months, of course, high path AI response has been a really big competing priority. So some of the testing has fallen a little bit more on the back burner, but we are still getting through it, and we still intend to get all of the tracing done. And then, of course, as I already mentioned, lack of accurate information has been a challenge. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, Katie, and that's just a high-level overview. I'm not sure if Angela has anything she'd like to add before we open it up for questions.
Thanks, Maggie. Dr. Pelzel, would you like to answer anything? Dr. Pelzel McCluskey. Oh, there she is.
No, just great overview, Maggie. Thank you so much. And just huge kudos to your team, Maggie, for working this all in, the whole investigation and the testing, working it into all those competing priorities and other high-level responses. You guys have done a tremendous job, not only getting this done, but also sorting out who's who and finding the right premises that we need to continue testing. So just huge kudos to you and your team. Thank you.
Thanks. And I will say Dr. McCluskey has answered probably the same question from us over and over and over again. So Angela, thanks for your patience and your support for our team.
Anytime.
Dr. Baldwin, we have one question that I received in regards to Colorado. Do they have sanctioned racing for quarter horses in Colorado?
Yes, we do. And we have been in discussion with that. That is under the Department of Revenue. They have the horse racing group, and I've met with them a couple of times. So we have one sanctioned track, and they do require pyroplasmosis testing for horses going to that track. They also require, if those horses leave that track and come back, that they be retested, even if it's a short period of time. So yes, there is sanctioned racing.
Well, you answered the second part of that question, which was going to be, do they have equine infectious anemia and pyroplasmosis testing requirement?
They do, yes. And they reach out to me every year before setting those requirements, and we work with them on what those requirements should be. Of course, it's their decision. There's been a lot of turnover in that group in the last couple of years. And so, trying to be a little bit more consistent with our outreach to them too has been helpful.
And just for clarification, on one of the points, these are all been determined to be iatrogenic transmission.
Yes, yeah. There's only one that does not appear to be for sure an iatrogenic transmission. Still could be, but still just unknown. And that's the roping horse. It could have been iatrogenic transmission that they didn't know about, or had come to the facility before that. So yeah, we don't. There's one that we just don't have clear evidence on.
And one more question I have, and I don't see any others in the chat right now, but one more question that I got received was related to the testing. How far back are you tracing at this time?
Oh, it has varied because some of these horses, with their history, we were able to find, past EIA for the horses that tested EIA positive only. We were able to find EIA negative tests coming into the state. So some had come from maybe Louisiana, a couple from Oklahoma that had come with a negative Coggins. But, the pyroplasmosis, if we don't have a negative test, we have found some for that. So the window has varied depending on the history that we've been able to find on these individual horses.
Okay, I don't see any more. I'm looking to see nothing in the chat. I don't see any hand. Oh, wait. Oh,
That was me.
that.
I just dropped the link to that YouTube investigative report for those that might be interested in seeing that. I thought, Angela, I'm sure you've seen that one. It's a very thorough, very well done investigative report. And obviously since that time, the match racing industry here in Colorado has just continued to grow. We see new tracks going up frequently in this kind of Weld Adams corridor. So yeah, we're going to be looking at, what are options to try and address that and see where we can get.
Good luck on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Baldwin. We know you're going off to legislature, so we appreciate you taking the time for us today. So,
you bet. And if anybody has anything after this, feel free to reach out directly. Thanks.
Thanks, Maggie. All right, moving on. We are going to move on to Dr. Toby Penn-Woodcock with a presentation on a paper on molecular detection of pathogens in equine fever diagnostic panel. I think I got that out right. Take it away, Dr. Toby. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. So recently...
Toby, sorry, yep, there it is. Okay. Sorry,
okay,
go ahead.
Perfect. All right. I am one of the veterinary support services team members at the Animal Health Diagnostic Lab at Cornell. And recently we published this paper, which looks at a particular equine fever of unknown origin panel retrospective results from 2019 to 2023. And the horses that this type of panel is typically run on are those horses presenting to the DVM with a ain't doing right sort of presentation. So they have a fever, a dull attitude, usually a decreased appetite, but oftentimes no leading clinical sign that tells the veterinarian whether this is a respiratory infection, gastrointestinal, neurologic, et cetera. So the vet is kind of left with a lot of differentials. And as a result of that, these are the differentials that are often considered, especially in the Northeast, but across the country. So Anaplasma phagocytophilum, which is tick-borne and causes fever, along with some other clinical signs like vasculitis and jaundice, Neorickettsia rickettsia or Finlay, which is the causative agent of Potomac horse fever, which typically presents as a diarrhea with endotoxemia and laminitis, but the first clinical sign can be fever prior to the GI signs developing. Strep equi, so strangles, an early strangles case might just have a fever to start with without any lymphadenopathy or nasal discharge. Beta coronavirus, which causes diarrhea, but can in mild cases just be dull off feed. Some cases will develop some colic signs as well. And then respiratory viruses that might initially just present ADR with a fever. So EHV1N4, equine adenovirus type 1, equine rhinitis virus is A and B, influenza, and equine arteritis virus. So because of all these potential differentials in a horse that's just ADR, the Cornell AHDC created this equine fever of unknown origin PCR panel. It requires the practitioner to collect 3 sample types: a respiratory sample, which can be a nasal swab in a plain tube with just a few drops of saline to keep it moist, or a nasopharyngeal wash, tracheal wash, or in a deceased horse, it could be fresh lung. A GI sample, which can be manure, or in a postmortem case could be colon contents or colon. And then EDTA whole blood, or postmortem, we could run this panel on spleen. And so we perform the testing that you can see here for all of those differentials on these 3 sample types, and they are all PCR. And so we wanted to look back since we started offering this panel in 2019 to see what we could learn. So we are only including horses in our retrospective that were older, that were adults, so over 1 year of age, and I should say equids. So we looked at horses, mules, and donkeys, and only those equids in North America. And we hoped to learn, if some of these differentials had preference for signalment, geographic distribution, seasonality, specimen preferences as well. So after implementing our inclusion criteria, we had 961 equine fever panels included in the project. We had mostly males with fewer female horses represented or equids represented. The median age was 11 years old with a range of 6 to 17 years. And these panels came from across the United States. You can see that, of course, there's higher distribution in the Northeast, just because that's where a lot of our Cornell samples come from. But we do receive samples from all around the country. And for breed distribution, it's pretty representative of the types of horses that we are seeing samples from in our neck of the woods here in the Northeast. So about 25% quarter horses, about 25% warm bloods, some fewer thoroughbreds, drafts, and other kind of light breeds. So we ended up detecting having 418 distinct pathogen detections. And I say that because in some cases we had multiple pathogens, but we had a total of 418 pathogen detections in these equine fever of unknown origin type cases. The most common pathogens were Anaplasma phagocytophilum and beta coronavirus, followed by Strep equi, and then you can see the rest there. And as I said, while we had more pathogen detections than cases because some of these had co-infections. So about 87% of those cases that tested positive for at least one pathogen had mono-infections. And the pathogens that we saw as mono-infections more than 75% of the time were anaplasmosis, beta coronavirus, Potomac horse fever, and EHV1. However, we did see co-infections in 13% of the cases. And we did see that equine influenza virus occurred as a co-infection more than 70% of the time that it was detected, which is interesting. So getting into some of the pathogens specifically, for Anaplasma phagocytophilum, you can see, and for Potomac horse fever, you can see that there's most of these cases are in the northeast, but we do have some detections of Potomac that are outside of the northeast. And for seasonality, we see that the peak seasonality for Anaplasma phagocytophilum is in the fall, and with fewer cases seen, significantly fewer cases in kind of wintertime. And then for Potomac horse fever, the peak season is summertime, where we see the most cases. And of course, this is not surprising given the vectors for these two pathogens. So for Anaplasma, it is tick-borne, the ixoid tick. And for Potomac horse fever, it is the mayflies and caddisflies, and kind of having the snails part of the life cycle that we tend to see in the warmer summer months. For the fall seasonality of anaplasmosis, the ticks do like to take a blood meal from a large mammalian host just prior to winter. So of course our equids are perfect large mammalian hosts, which would explain why we see more cases of Anaplasma phagocytophilum in the fall. And of course, PCR is not the only way that we can detect Anaplasma phagocytophilum cases. So we can also see the Anaplasma morula within neutrophils in a blood smear. We had about 4% of these cases that met the inclusion criteria submitted along with a full CBC. And we had blood smears evaluated in 7 of the Anaplasma PCR positive cases. And we found morula within the neutrophils on only 3 out of the 7 CBCs that were run in Anaplasma positive cases. So it's important for practitioners to remember that you may not find the morula in a blood smear, and it doesn't mean it's not there. Running PCR is a more sensitive means of making a diagnosis. For beta coronavirus, it was found across the country, so pretty well distributed, you can see here. And of course, we tend to see more beta coronavirus cases in these horses that are just presenting ADR with a fever in the winter time. Coronavirus does like cool, damp environments. And so therefore we see significantly fewer cases testing positive kind of in peak summer in August. So that fits with what we know, the environment that we know this virus likes to thrive in. Moving on to some of the respiratory pathogen patterns, we looked at sample type for EHV1 and 4. We encourage our submitters to submit both an EDTA whole blood sample and a nasal swab when they're looking for EHV1 and 4. And so the Equine Fever of Unknown Origin panel that we runs both of these EHV1 and 4 PCRs on both sample types. So it was a nice opportunity to compare the findings. And you can see that for EHV4, we saw it in nasal swab only in 18 cases. We saw it in both nasal swab and EDTA whole blood in 13 cases, and then in blood only in 4. So again, kind of showing the importance of submitting both sample types. We had fewer EHV1 detections, however, kind of a similar pattern. And I think this is even more important to highlight the need to submit both EDTA whole blood and a nasal swab when you have EHV1 on your differential list. So you never know if you'll detect it being shed nasally or if you'll detect viremia or both. We did want to investigate any age-related patterns with these pathogens as well. And we did find 2 significant differences in that horses that tested positive for EHV4 were tended to be younger than the kind of the mean age of the sampled population, and horses that tested positive for Anaplasma phagocytophilum tended to be a little bit older. And then finally, our prior to last year, we did not include Salmonella culture in our equine fever of unknown origin panel. We do now, and we don't do PCR, we do culture, so that our submitters can then request susceptibility testing if it is positive. But we started implementing that as part of the equine fever panel after this study, where we had 22% of the cases where a Salmonella culture was run in addition to the fever panel. And 5 of those cases, there was Salmonella growth on culture. And interestingly, there's a little typo on this slide, but interestingly, all 5 of those cases that tested positive for Salmonella had no PCR detections for any of the other pathogens. So I think it just highlighted that Salmonella infection is a differential for equine fever, maybe, septicemia and prior to the development of diarrhea. And therefore we wanted to include it. So it is now part of our panel, and you can see the different serotypes here that we found in those 5 cases that tested positive. So that kind of concludes, I think, the most important findings from the retrospective, and I'll take any questions.
So there's a couple points just to make. I did drop the paper in the chat. I apologize for not sending that out with the call agenda. That was my intent, but I forgot to. So the paper that Dr. Pinwoodcock is referencing is linked in the chat. So there's a couple of questions that I'm going to start with in the chat. The flu is commonly with what additional pathogens? I believe you said 75% were dual.
For co-infections,
Yeah.
Yes, a variety of other pathogens, and I didn't list them all. But if you look at the paper, there's a nice heat map that shows that where you can see all the co-infections.
Okay. Another question, are results of reportable diseases forwarded to state veterinary offices where the horse is from? I believe you said this was the retrospective study though, right? Correct?
This was a retrospective study, but yes, the Cornell HDC notifies regulatory veterinarians of reportable diseases when they're detected.
Another question, do you enrich the sample for Salmonella PCR before running the PCR?
Our lab does enrich both culture and PCR for Salmonella prior to running it. And that is one reason why the turnaround time for Salmonella culture and PCR at our lab ends up being similar. And to keep the cost of this panel, this big panel down, we elected not to do both culture and PCR so that people wouldn't balk as much at the cost. So that was part of the decision there to offer culture as well and not culture and PCR combined.
Well, the cost was just brought up. What is the cost for the panel?
It's a great question. Give me 2 seconds and I'll let you know the current price. We'll look it up. $222.50.
Perfect. Okay. The other question is, what is the fever cutoff that was utilized for this study?
So we don't always receive histories with our submissions. So we were not really able to, while we can look at clinical signs that we might have received on some of our submissions, they're mostly lacking histories. So there was no fever cutoff. So it was just a veterinarian determining that they felt that the clinical signs that they appreciated warranted this panel. But we have no way of knowing if every horse had a fever that it was run on.
Well, that answers the next question because the follow-up question to that is, was there any correlation at fever level to the pathogen detected?
No, and that's why we encourage all veterinarians to include a nice history on their submission form, so it can help us with some of these projects. But unfortunately, the majority of our submissions are lacking histories.
Okay, I'm looking in the chat. I think I might have gotten all the chat. I don't see any hands raised. Are there any other questions for Dr. Penwoodcock? And as I mentioned, the paper is put in the chat. I apologize for not sending it out with the call agenda. All right, last
Thank you.
call. Thank you. Thanks, Toby. Have a good one. Okay, moving on. We do have our TBA, Dr. Angela Pelzel-McCleskey. Can you hear me? Are you able to get on?
I think I'm back.
You are back. All right. Our TBA is Dr. Pelzel-McCleskey, who is going to give us a vesicular stomatitis update.
Yeah, Katie, and I'm going to try to share this, so I don't know if that's going to work or not, but let's just give it a second, see if this comes up for you.
Yep, it's on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So thanks so much for just a few minutes to update you on vesicular stomatitis. We still have an ongoing outbreak in Arizona that is not stopping. So that is everyone's fair warning in the southwestern United States that it is probably coming to your state soon, spring and summer potentially. Unfortunately, this is a really strange one. I put in the chat the link to the USDA website, our vesicular stomatitis page, where we are posting all of the situation reports. And your indicator that I have posted a new situation report that you can go look at will be an EDCC posting. So if you sign up for EDCC alerts, you will get notification that I've posted a new SITREP, and it'll also give you some tidbits about which new county or why I posted a new SITREP, what updates we have. But this is what the SITREP looks like. It has pretty much all the information I would think that you would want. The last one I posted on March 4th because we had a new premises identified in Yavapai County. But as I said, all of the current outbreak is located in Arizona. So we've had a total of 13 vesicular stomatitis confirmed positive premises in 6 counties in Arizona since the start of the outbreak. The outbreak started October 31st. This is our United States first incursion of vesicular stomatitis into the country during the fall season. We have never had that happen before. That makes our climate in Arizona look a little more like northern Mexico instead of the southwestern United States. I usually get cases in Mexico and northern Mexico in the wintertime, December through February. And we have kind of switched over now to that sort of climate with the rainfall and the weather that they're receiving since the fall. It did kick off an incursion of the virus into the United States from Mexico. So far, a very small outbreak, very manageable. Right now, we only have 4 premises still quarantined. Those are coming off on a regular basis. Just as a reminder, the quarantine period is 14 days from the onset of lesions in the last affected animal on the premises. So we have to monitor the affected livestock, and the last one to present with clinical signs starts a 14-day countdown. And then if no new clinical signs have emerged, then we don't restart the countdown and we release the quarantine. To date, all of the premises have been equine only lesioned. There have been about 6 premises that have had cattle or goats or other susceptible species present, but they were not clinically affected. So the vectors that are biting right now and are transmitting vesicular stomatitis virus, this is VSV New Jersey virus, if you're interested in the strain type. The vectors that are biting right now seem to prefer horses. I think most of you know that when we do have VSV outbreaks, horses are our primary affected species, probably a lot with how we handle them and watch them every day and manage them, but also potentially due to some vector preference for equids. We did have an outbreak in the Salt River Wild Horse Management herd in the Salt River Range in the Tonto National Forest. So those were wild horses that were clinically affected with VSV. and they have since resolved, and that area has been released. The state veterinarian did restrict livestock movement into and out of that region of the Tonto National Forest for a period of time in order to prevent outside horses coming in and getting infected and then leaving. So I think probably some trail riders were upset with that, but it was for their own protection. This is a map of the current affected counties. We still have 3 counties right now with recent positive cases where we probably still have active transmission going on from what we've seen. And then we also have a cumulative map that I keep in the SITREP to show you where all it's been so far. Final thing I want to note is I've done this little graph. This does not look like a real epidemic curve. It looks like a sporadically popcorned VSV incursion. But this is what's happening. We're continuing to get new cases in equids in Arizona in that affected region as recently as just a few weeks ago. So this is probably going to continue into the spring. I'm not seeing any signs of it stopping. They've still had plenty of water, plenty of bugs. I think some of the surrounding states have had something similar. I am worried about Southern California this spring and summer with way more water than they usually get and way more bugs. I was just at Los Alamitos in Southern California day before yesterday, and there were a lot of bugs. So a bit concerning, but for the historically affected states, please do take any calls that you get for potential vesicular lesions in horses, cattle, or other species. Please take those seriously. Please do go ahead and contact me, and we will submit samples and get VSV and any of the other differentials ruled out. But we do need to maintain some awareness because it doesn't look like this is going to quit on its own, and it certainly could start rolling as we get into the spring and summer months. So Katie, I'll just stop and see if there are any questions or comments.
Well, you just started my comment. So for the predicting modeling here or thinking of what direction we're going, you're thinking based on weather pattern, California direction versus the normal other route of Texas up through to Colorado area.
I think it's going to go outward from here. Clearly, we have a nidus in Arizona that is moving northward. So upward and outward would be the normal expansion type season that we would expect after an incursion. And this was an incursion. So we could also get future incursions in the spring and early summer into Texas, New Mexico, and again into Arizona. So that could happen too. We could have a rolling new incursion in addition to a potential expansion year.
Well, you're predicting my next question. Do we have any evidence or information out of Mexico about potential new incursion up through?
So because Mexico is 100% focused right now on their New World screwworm response, they have not been reporting cases of vesicular stomatitis, even though I know that they are there. So no visibility at this point for surveillance of VSV in the northern Mexican tier states, and that's due to their ongoing screwworm response, in my opinion.
Okay, so predictions are
It's already here, babe.
It's moving. All right, we don't really like to hear that from the show side of things and the competition side of things or the movement side of things, but okay. Any other questions?
Challenging, but not insurmountable. So
yep, true. Any other questions before I transition into screwworm updates? Angela, I'm not seeing any. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate your work on giving us the situation reports in a very timely manner and helping us through this. So thank you for all you do. All right, I'm going to just transition to a couple announcements on screwworm. As this time, it's just going to give you some background of what's been recently reported from USDA since our last call. So the USDA Army Corps of Engineers has signed a contract for building a production facility. So that press release went out by USDA on the 9th of March. And on the 10th of March, FDA issued an emergency use authorization for a topical spray to prevent and treat New World screwworm in multiple species, which does include horses. So if you're interested in more information on that, it is on the USDA's main screwworm page under latest news and announcements. As far as where we're at with screwworm, the closest cases detected are still in the, oh goodness, I'm going to kill this name, Tamaulipas, however we say it, I'm sorry. We are seeing those as of March 3rd posting. So we are seeing cases still in that area. The USDA website does have those cases posted and a map as far as the distribution of the sterile fly. So those are just some quick updates. And the other update I would add is USDA has stated that they are putting out a version 2 of their New World Screwworm Playbook here in the coming month. So we will, once that is published, we will get USDA on the call to kind of give an overview of the changes that were in that document. But at this time, they're still working through getting that document through final approval. So with that, I would just say that's all I have for the screwworm update. And just a reminder for those of you that joined a little bit late, we will not have an April call due to some scheduling conflicts. So we will reserve our call or return our call, excuse me, in May. So again, I welcome any topics or suggestions, and this call will be posted on the Equine Disease Communication Center within a week of time. So thank you for today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great one. Bye.